Everyone told you that you were smart, and you believed them. You got good grades without really trying. Teachers loved you. Your parents bragged about you at dinner parties. You were the one in the family, the kid who was going somewhere. And then something happened. At some point, the easy stopped being easy. The grades got harder to maintain. The praise started to feel like pressure. You looked around and saw people working twice as hard as you and somehow catching up. And instead of pushing through, you did something strange. You stopped. Not all at once, slowly, quietly. You started avoiding the hard stuff. You turned in work that was good enough. You told yourself you just weren't interested anymore. You picked things you already knew you were good at and ran away from everything else. If any of this sounds familiar, I need you to watch this entire video. Because what happened to you is not laziness. It's not lack of ambition. It has a name. And once you understand it, you will never see yourself the same way again. Let's go back. Picture yourself at 7, 8, maybe 9 years old. You figured things out faster than the other kids. Reading came easy. Math made sense. You finished your work early and sat there waiting while everyone else was still on question 3. Adults responded to this in a very specific way. They called you gifted. And with that word came a whole identity. You weren't just a kid who did well in school. You became the smart one. That was your role, your value, the thing that made you special. And here's the problem nobody told you about. When your identity is built on being naturally smart, you start to believe something dangerous. You start to believe that intelligence is something you have, not something you build. You start to believe that real ability shows up effortlessly. That if something is hard, maybe you're just not cut out for it. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called a fixed mindset. And gifted children are unfortunately the most at risk of developing it, because every piece of feedback they got as a kid reinforced it. You weren't praised for working hard. You were praised for being smart. So what happens when things get hard? When they require actual work? When they require sitting with confusion and not knowing and struggling? Your brain sends you a message. This shouldn't be this hard for someone like you. And that message is the beginning of everything that went wrong.
For most gifted kids, there's a moment, sometimes in middle school, sometimes in high school, sometimes not until university, where the world stops accommodating them. Up until that point, school had basically been designed for you. The pace was your pace. The material clicked fast. You barely had to try. But then it stops. Suddenly, you're in a class where everyone is smart, where you're doing something genuinely new and genuinely difficult, and you sit down to work on it, and nothing comes. You stare at the blank page. You read the same paragraph 4 times, and it still doesn't make sense. And instead of thinking, okay, I need to try harder, you think something else entirely. You think, maybe I'm not actually that smart. That thought is terrifying, because if you're not the smart one, who are you? So you do what any rational person does when they're terrified. You avoid. You don't turn in the assignment because you'd rather have them think you didn't try than have them see you try your hardest and still fail. You drop the class. You quit the thing. You find reasons why it doesn't matter anyway.
I want to stop here for a second. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself, I need you to know something. You are not broken. You are not a failure. You are not someone who peaked in childhood and has nowhere to go from here. You are someone who was handed a story about yourself at a very young age, a story you never chose, and you've been trying to live inside that story ever since. The problem was never you.
The problem was the story, and you can write a new one. But first, stay with me, because what comes next is the part most people never hear. This is where it actually starts to change. And if you found this video useful so far, hit subscribe. I make videos exactly like this one every week on the psychology of the mind and why we do what we do. One click. It costs you nothing. Let's keep going. Here's something most gifted adults have never been told. Your intelligence was never the most important thing about you. I know that sounds almost offensive, but stay with me. When everyone around you spent years treating your intelligence as your defining trait, your most valuable quality, the thing that made you worthy of love and attention, they accidentally did something harmful. They made your self-worth conditional. Conditional on performing, on succeeding, on being impressive. When you're a kid, you don't know how to push back on that. You just absorb it. You learn that love and praise and safety come when you're smart and successful.
There's one more trap I want to talk about: the comparison spiral. Gifted kids grow up being compared to others, and usually coming out on top. You were always the smart one in the room, and there's a part of your brain that got used to that needed it. So when you enter a bigger pond, university, a new job, a new city, and suddenly you're not the smartest person in the room anymore, something breaks. And it doesn't break quietly. It breaks in the form of obsessive comparison. You start measuring yourself against everyone around you all the time. Who's further along in their career? Who got promoted? Who's publishing research, starting companies, making things happen? And you use that comparison not as motivation, but as evidence. Evidence for the voice that's been whispering since you were 12. See? You never were that special. Here's what that voice never tells you. The people you're comparing yourself to, they're comparing themselves to someone else. Nobody at the top feels like they're at the top. The game of comparison has no finish line. You can spend your entire life losing a race nobody else is even running. And more importantly, you are not running their race. You are running yours. And you fell behind on yours because you spent the last 10 years trying to protect an identity instead of building a life. But you can stop right now, today. Not by becoming suddenly confident, not by having some transformational moment, but by making one tiny, almost embarrassingly small decision. Here's what nobody tells you about recovering from gifted kid burnout. It's not dramatic. There's no single breakthrough, no one conversation that fixes it, no book that rewires you overnight. It happens in small, boring, repeated moments where you choose to stay instead of run. You sit with the confusion instead of closing the tab. You ask the question you're afraid sounds stupid. You turn in the imperfect draft instead of turning in nothing. You admit to someone that you don't know what you're doing. Each one of those moments is terrifying at first, because every single one of them puts your image at risk. Every single one of them is a chance for someone to see that you're not effortlessly brilliant. But here's what actually happens when you do them anyway. I want to be honest with you about something that doesn't usually get said in videos like this. There is grief in this process. Because when you start letting go of the gifted identity, when you start building a self-worth that doesn't depend on being impressive, you have to mourn something. You have to mourn the version of yourself that was going to be effortlessly exceptional. The prodigy, the one who was always going to arrive. You've been carrying that version with you for a long time, waiting for the moment when everything clicks and you finally become the person everyone always said you'd be. That moment is not coming. Not in the way you imagined it. Not because you're not capable, but because that version of success was always a fantasy. Effortless genius doesn't exist. The people you admire worked hard for a long time, behind closed doors in ways nobody got to see. And when you grieve that fantasy, when you actually let it go,
something unexpected happens. You feel lighter because you've been carrying that weight, the weight of unmet potential, of a story you couldn't live up to for so long. And setting it down is the most freeing thing you can do. What replaces it is something better. Not a fantasy of effortless success, but the real thing. Messy, inconsistent, uncertain. Yours. So where do you start? Not with a complete reinvention, not with a 10-step plan, not with another productivity system that you'll abandon in a week. Start with one question. Ask yourself, what is one thing I've been avoiding because I'm afraid of looking incompetent? Just one thing. And then do a version of it so small, it almost feels pointless. Don't write the whole essay. Write one paragraph. Don't start the whole project. Open the document.
I want to leave you with something. The fact that you were called gifted, it didn't ruin you. It gave you something real. A mind that moves quickly, a capacity for connection and pattern recognition, an ability to understand things in ways that genuinely help people. Those things are still there. They didn't disappear when the burnout hit. What got damaged was the relationship between that mind and the work it needs to do to actually flourish. The work of staying, of trying, of being wrong, of building. And that relationship, unlike your childhood, is entirely within your control to repair. You are not someone who peaked at 12. You are someone who got handed a broken map and has been wandering around with it, wondering why nothing looks like it's supposed to. You don't need a better version of you. You need a better map. And that map starts with one simple truth you may have never really let yourself believe. Your value is not what you produce. Your value is not your performance. Your value is not contingent on impressing anyone. Not your parents, not your teachers, not the audience in your head. You are allowed to be a person who struggles and is still worth something. You are allowed to not know what you're doing. You are allowed to try and fail and try again